You ever look at the entire United States Marine Corps and just wish it stopped existing?
If you happen to be the US government, or if you ever went through Marine Corps boot camp, your answer is probably yes.
Today on FailSafe, we explore everyone's favorite ASVAB-waving crayon-eating cult and why getting rid of them is probs not a good idea.
Despite the mythical status of the Marines today, it seems like every other year, someone, somewhere, is trying to remove them completely. This is a viral article published in December of 2025 that calls for the immediate disbandment of the United States Marine Corps, listing things like fiscal responsibility, mission redundancy, and other stuff I don't actually give a fuck about. If you happen to be a Marine and cannot read, don't worry. Here are some bunch of emojis that describe what this article was talking about.
And while this is the latest headline to make waves with that kind of talk, people have been trying to get rid of the Marines ever since the American Revolution back in the 1700s. And shockingly, they sometimes actually manage to. There are three common trends that usually kick off the government wanting to get rid of the Marines. A major war just ended, the military budget shrinks, or a senator's daughter started to date a lance corporal.
Former Marine infantryman Zach Bell can explain far better than me.
Thanks for having me involved, guys. It's pretty cool being the token Marine. The first time this happened was back in the year 1783 when America finally gained full independence. Marines at that time were basically there to guard ships, but they did do a bit of ground infantry stuff like the raid in Nassau in 1776. Back then, they were called Continental Marines and fell under the Continental Navy. I guess calling it Ocean Navy made too much sense. There weren't a ton of them, but they were able to punch above their weight when they did end up duking it out with the Brits, and were seen as better trained and more professional than their Army cousins. Some things never change, and they never will. But when the US snatched the dub from King George, the new America didn't want them anymore. I guess they were scared of success. Who knows?
America, right after the Revolution, didn't really have much of a navy or money or the desire to go fight people with ships that would require Marines in the first place. They were seen as a kind of European-style luxury that wasn't needed anymore, like powdered wigs or calling beans on toast breakfast. The newly formed United States also just wasn't a big fan of standing militaries in general at the time, so when the Continental Army got sent home, so did the Marines. That was until 1798 during the XYZ affair when French pirates kept stealing American ships in the Caribbean and the US had to basically build a navy overnight. Those ships needed guards and dudes to perform landing parties, and so the Marines came back that same year.
I can't think of anything more embarrassing than being taken over by French pirates specifically.
That would be the absolute worst. I mean, it's kind of a slap in the face twice. Reminds me a little bit of when the Iranians captured the US troops. There's just something very embarrassing about being captured and put in cuffs.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. Maybe they don't want to touch them. I don't think either groups are known for their hygiene specifically. Can you imagine the smell? If you think Paris smells bad, that place, a French ship, no better.
Gross.
Now, this might sound weird, but having the Marines blasting French sailors in the face with muskets set a precedent that basically started the same argument today over having them at all. But why pay to have two separate branches of guys that run around shooting people with rifles? Why can't we just have one? Why not just give the job of Marines to the Army and save a little bit of money? See, at the time, the Marines were used to shoot at French people specifically because they weren't an actual army. And because it wasn't an actual army, just boat people, the US didn't have to declare it an actual war for, reasons. But I'm sure that guy that got bayoneted in the face by an illiterate 20-year-old in a Marine uniform probably felt like he was in a real war. But on the world political stage, it technically wasn't. They were skirmishes that no one wanted to escalate into anything bigger.
That trend kept going in the 1800s, like the Pirate Wars, aka the Barbary Wars, where Marines were used to fight small battles overseas that wouldn't actually start full-scale wars, like the famous Tripoli raid in 1805. Everybody loves this raid, but because they were so useful, the Marines that is, they kept getting used again and again. What started as a bunch of drunk guys protecting a ship from British boarding parties in the 1700s became a small army that was just really good at being on boats during the 1800s. By the 1830s, the United States had enjoyed a good stint of peacetime and were looking to cut costs once again. So President Andrew Jackson came into office in 1829 running on a platform based on having a smaller federal government, less national spending, and having duels with people you share disagreements with. The Navy said that they could protect their own boats, and the Army had the ground game totally handled. And it wasn't looking good for the Devil Dogs. They weren't called Devil Dogs yet in 1829, but you get the idea.
But right as Congress was about to vote on disbanding the old USMC, the perfect reason to keep them around appeared. Groups of people kept popping up that really needed to get shot by someone, and the easiest way to get to those people was on a big boat. It's the same kind of argument for having Marines that we have today. It's not that Army soldiers physically cannot be used for those kinds of international skirmishes. It's that the Army and Marines are fundamentally structured completely differently.
The Army is like a sledgehammer. It's big, it's heavy, and it's slow to get moving, but when it does hit, it causes a lot of damage. It's built around ground logistics and large formations. The Marines, on the other hand, were more like a normal hammer. We're sticking with blunt objects for this metaphor because I'm not allowed to have knives anymore. They're lighter, faster to get going, but still able to punch a hole into somebody's brain housing group. When institutional things like formations, you got gear, training, tactics, and logistics are built with boat deployments in mind, it's not just like a simple swap around to make it happen. But a lot of the confusion around the exact same kind of thing today comes from the 20 years of fighting in the Middle East. Unless I somehow missed something, you can't exactly conduct a beach landing in Afghanistan.
You can try, but it's probably not going to go how you want it to.
No, I thought that you couldn't conduct like much of an amphibious landing in Iran either, but it seems like that might be put to the test.
I mean, it's either them or the 82nd Airborne jumping in. I imagine it's like a race. They're probably all just arguing at the Pentagon who gets that mission.
It reminds me of like, you're going to send special forces to kill bin Laden, or you're going to send the SEALs.
You got two generals in a pissing contest right as we speak right now.
In Afghanistan, Marines basically did the opposite of a beach landing and were handed the mission that's almost always reserved for the Army, an airfield seizure. Task Force 58 that was centered around the 15th MEU snatched Camp Rhino right from the Taliban's grubby hands. They launched from amphibious assault ships in the North Arabian Sea, packed into the back of Marine helicopters, flying more than 400 miles inland to a remote landing strip. Since it was right next to Kandahar, basically the Taliban's base of operations, it kept them distracted while the Army and Northern Alliance forces conducted other missions. Then they pushed to the actual Kandahar International Airport and helped take it over. Also, I spent some time there. There was a place called the Boardwalk. When I was there, the GWAT was hot and coin was cool, and Halliburton was balling out for real. Dick Cheney knew how to do a wharf. The first landing was in November 2001, and by December, America owned all of Kandahar and the surrounding region. Hell yeah, thanks Toby Keith. Same thing happened in Iraq. When the Army pushed towards Baghdad, the Marines pushed towards Nasiriyah, forcing the Iraqis to defend 2 attacks at once. After that, it was kind of a manpower game. You need a lot of boots on the ground and dudes with rifles to do counterinsurgency. And the Marines just happen to have a lot of guys wearing boots and carrying rifles. But the reason why the Marines were so successful, especially in that first push in Afghanistan, is because of how they operate. Pack light, move quick, the end. The Marines have the same stuff as the Army, like artillery and vehicles with big guns on top, that's what she said. But they also have their own Air Force, and they're integrated into the actual Navy. So it makes these rapid deployments carrying a lot of firepower way faster.
When Marines are doing stereotypical Marine stuff, it would make sense to wonder why we would have them at all. But even when the Marines are doing nothing but stereotypical Marine stuff, you know, storming beaches and playing gay chicken in the showers, people still wanted to get rid of them. The Marine Corps in the Pacific during World War II is the perfect example. Their island hopping campaign against the Japanese Empire was legendary. When the American flag was erected over Iwo Jima, then Secretary of the Navy James V. Forrestal famously said, "This means a Marine Corps for the next 500 years. Seems like case closed and we all go off killing into the sunset, but not quite. During the enormous drawdown right after World War II, defense budgets were collapsing, and the different military branches were at each other's throats trying to get funded.
Both President Truman and President Eisenhower, both former Army officers, by the way, wanted to get rid of the United States Marine Corps. Eisenhower especially really had it out for the Marines on like a personal level. His argument was that the Army also conducted major beach landings in World War II, and that the US couldn't afford to have both at the same time. Funny enough, his quote referencing Army beach landings would eventually be adapted into the hit 2005 video game Call of Duty 2. And they were right. The Army did in fact conduct the largest amphibious landing campaign in history, and also fought in the Pacific right alongside the Marines. In 1947, the Feds formally recognized the Marines as part of the Department of the Navy, which helped quell a few arguments about administrative redundancies. What it did not do, however, was promise a force size, meaning at any moment, Congress could just turn around, vote to slash Marine numbers down to skeleton crew sizes, or even just to 0 if they want.
I think it'd be funny if instead of slashing it to 0, they slashed it to like 2, and they made sure they picked 2 guys who didn't like each other. So it's literally just the entire Marine Corps is just 2 lance corporals who get on each other's nerves.
And they always deploy them together at the same time.
Yeah. But the threat of reducing the Marine Corps to 0, or just 2 guys that you want a sitcom, caused the Revolt of the Admirals from 1947 to 49, where current and former Navy officials went on a political tirade, basically strong-arming the DoD into keeping the Marines around, among other things. But it was still kind of looking fairly grim for the Corps, and that was until North Korea decided to invade South Korea in 1950. The Army was rapidly losing ground in the opening days of the fighting, and the situation was getting more than desperate. General Douglas MacArthur decided to conduct a daring and highly risky beach landing at the coastal city of Inchon to break the North's momentum. The Battle of Inchon was a resounding success, and the textbook definition of a decisive victory that completely changed the tide of the entire war. The group spearheading that assault was none other than the 1st Marine Division. And suddenly, everyone loved them again. Big surprise.
Here's the issue with a beach landing that's actually heavily defended. Basically, the only thing that's more dangerous than contested beach landings is telling your wife what you really think about her friends. Don't do that. If my wife is watching this, I was talking about the viewer's wife, not you, honey. Your friends are great. It's basically the most complicated mission you can do. There are roughly 1 billion moving parts, and if one dude screws up, it's gonna cause a lot of pain for everyone else down the road. It takes a ton of practice, over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. Even if you guys have done it 100 times, shit is still gonna go wrong 99% of the times.
See, there's a big issue with the Army doing these kinds of landings. It takes an ass load of planning, fleets of specialized equipment, and most importantly, people who already know how to do it. Soldiers and Marines only get so much time and resources to conduct training. Both branches also already have too many skills they need to be qualified on to do it as it stands. Adding beach landing to the Army's already overflowing plate means everyone's going to be a little worse at every other job.
And being a little worse at hitting the beach under gunfire translates to a lot more people's moms getting a free triangle flag on a random Thursday afternoon. It makes sense to keep one dedicated branch of the military focused on that one specific task. It's the same reason that the Air Force split off from the Army, that the Space Force split off from the Air Force, and that my ex-wife split off from me. At least that's what I tell myself every night. From a cultural and strategic sense, the usefulness of the Marines was solidified when they landed in Korea and started hole-punching commies in the forehead. But that still didn't mean that people were happy about it. In the early Cold War, when giant missiles and long-range bombers were all the rage, military planners tried to figure out how to replace the Corps with tactical nukes and B-52 raids. By 1957, the number of Marines had dropped from 250,000 in 1953 to just 170,000 4 years later. But things like the 1958 Lebanon intervention and the Taiwan Strait crisis once again proved the need for rapidly deployable ground forces that had a full Navy to back them up. Don't get me wrong, missiles are cool and all, but they can't always replace boots on the ground.
Vietnam was the Marines' next big time to shine, but the same arguments popped up. Wars were being fought on land, and the Marines were seen as redundant. Marine Corps troop numbers plummeted after the war, as if on cue, and they were treated like the red-headed stepchildren of the DoD. America was gearing up to fight the Russians in Europe, and at the time, that meant having huge numbers of soldiers already sitting at the border waiting for the Reds to come over the Iron Gate. The West was planning for a massive slugfest of a ground war, not one that would be fought or won on a coastline. Not to mention, the Soviets got really good at building missiles that would make a contested beach landing damn near impossible, if not actually literally impossible. Sure, the Marines have the coolest uniforms and best TV commercials, but that isn't going to stop an anti-ship missile from vaporizing your assault ship.
Budgets continued to fall for the Marines, and things kept getting worse. In the 1980s, a former peanut farmer and President of the United States, Jimmy Carter, stood up the RDF, or Rapid Deployment Force. This was a large unit of highly trained service members that would be able to respond to any international crisis with boots on the ground within 18 hours. While being an international rapid deployment force has been the job of the Marines since basically forever, the RDF was handed to the Army's 82nd Airborne. Ironically, though, it was the fall of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War that saved the Marines as America's elite fighters that have to start every battle with wet socks and sand in their underwear. This was honestly the big reason why I didn't join the Marines. Imagine having to ruck with sand in your boots. Couldn't be me. Also, I have a terrifying fear of the deep water ocean. Anything that is in deep water is terrifying. What is it doing hiding under there? No thank you.
What's the word for that? Being afraid of deep water?
I'm glad that you know about that. There is a word for it. It's like a aquaphobia or something. Or then there's a go even further, and it's like a fear of seeing large objects in water. So if you see like a shipwreck underwater, that bugs you out. I know a lot about this.
But no more big bad USSR to worry about meant that the US would have a much harder time trying to guess where and when the next conflict broke out. That bit of strategic ambiguity is exactly what the Marine Corps needed to shine. They bring a lot more firepower than a single unsupported brigade from the 82nd Airborne, but still move a lot faster around the globe than any other similar Army formations. The 90s ended up being a pretty good year to be a Marine. In December of 1992, they conducted a beach landing in Somalia, stabilized Haiti with boots on the ground in 1994, and supported NATO peacekeeping in Bosnia from 95 to 96. Iraq and Afghanistan, kicking off in the early 2000s, brought back some of the confusion over responsibilities, especially when fighting in, landlocked countries. As things started winding down in the Middle East a bit in the 2010s, the Corps was starting to hurt again. 2011 saw the biggest reduction in Marine Corps troop numbers since Vietnam, losing 10% of their total manpower. In 2013, sequestration cuts reduced their training budget, modernization efforts, and slowed down deployments.
But since then, the world changed a lot. And so did the Marines. Because in March of 2020, the United States Marine Corps began Force Design 2030. Tanks were removed, missiles became the primary artillery, and formations were totally reworked. Marines went from looking like tan-colored troops using outdated gear to door-kicker dudes with every cool bit of equipment, from suppressors to high-cut, badass helmets, anything you can imagine. The goal for all of these reforms was very straightforward. Build a force specifically designed to fight China in the Pacific, and put all focus on missions that only the Marine Corps can do. But even though that war hasn't started yet, they've been the most widely used rapid response force in recent years, being pushed off the coast of Venezuela, Iran, and just about every Pacific country since. They bring a unique combination of tactics and equipment, unlike anything that the Army has to offer. And as a former Army grunt myself, I am, for one, grateful that the Marine Corps existed when I was in, mostly because it meant that I didn't have to be around people who wanted to join the Marine Corps, and also because they got to do all the hard missions while I sat back and ate hotcakes.
Can't complain about that. But thank you guys for watching. We appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed today's video. Make sure to like our other stuff that we have that may or may not be on the screen around me.